Many of yesterday's protesters were not met with violence or force from law enforcement, while Black Lives Matter protesters in D.C. were tear gassed, hit with rubber bullets, and arrested. Ohio Democratic Congresswoman and former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Marcia Fudge, said there was, quote, no question the response from police was different. The NAACP also made note of the double standard, tweeting a viral video of a Capitol Police officer taking a selfie with one of the Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol building, calling it a dark day in America. The group also tweeted, "And you thought taking a knee was too much," referencing the backlash that Colin Kaepernick received for kneeling during the national anthem.
You know, what's interesting about this is that I watched this coverage from the start for about 5 hours. And what struck me and everybody else that was on, not only on social media, that people were calling me, is that the response from that, well, first of all, we need some answers from the Capitol Police. We know this because there's no way that this should have ever gotten this far. How many times have we gone to the Capitol and we can't even get past the barriers because our ID is not up to par or something like that? And then to see these random people storm this place, a government building, storm it. Police officers who were there did nothing. Not a shot was fired in the entire time that I watched. There was no tear gas in the entire time that I watched. And the only difference is the Black Lives Matter people were met with force and they were peaceful demonstrators. But the only difference is Black Lives Matter, the protesters, the majority of them were black and the majority of these people were white. So there's a racial element to this, whether you want to admit it or not. They did not anticipate that this would happen. Before the Black Lives Matter group even got to Washington, D.C., there were plans in place. They had military lined up. They had streets shut down. They had all these plans in place. And for this group, there was nothing. There was nothing done. And then even when they got inside the Capitol, they were threatening and they were destroying property. They were doing all these different things. The police had zero response. No response. If this had been a black group, shots would have been fired immediately and there would have been a bloodbath. Everybody knows that. Everybody's talking about it on social media. There's definitely a double standard. It's not even up for debate.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, Wisdom. And I likened it to if you had this outside of the White House, like we have seen before, the breach of the building, the smashing of the windows, the crawling into the Capitol would have been like the people outside of the White House scaling the fence, suddenly collectively scaling the fence of the White House to get onto the White House property. How do you think that response would have been compared to what we saw yesterday? And two other quick points, Wisdom. I agree with you completely. I have credentials to legally be in the Capitol whenever I want, which I do. But if I jumped that line, I would be immediately taken into custody. Right. Mm-hmm. Yet someone who smashes the glass of the window and goes inside and rummages through things is able to walk out, which is my third point is, even if you are, as a Capitol Police officer, overmanned, if you are not ready for that situation, if you feel it is best at that time to let the people run their course and you let them in, that is one thing. But why in the world did you not stop them and let them out?
The difference was jarring. And even leading up to, I mean, remember yesterday we were talking about the threats that were made, that they were going to be bringing guns. I mean, it was boldly declaring what we're going to be bringing and what we're going to be doing. The numbers jumped as far as the permit from 5,000 to 30,000. So you're also expecting large crowds. And the security measures that we're used to seeing for large protests, particularly for Black Lives Matter protests, which in that case, they are protesting police brutality, racial injustice, very valid points. In this case, they are upset because an election did not work out the way that they wanted it to. So already the premise itself for the protest is invalid. And we didn't see preemptively any measures being taken place. And as it was happening, you're talking about the capital of the United States, one of the most powerful countries in the world, hundreds of people scaling the building, going inside with dozens of lawmakers holding this proceeding for the next president of the United States. It was disturbing, and I think it really harms what law enforcement has been trying to do, especially recently, saying there either is not an issue with racial injustice and things of that matter. This absolutely does not help their case. And the fact that Capitol Police have yet to speak on this, is also troubling.
It's inexcusable. It's unfair. The disparity was blatant, and it was overwhelmingly angry. It made me angry. It made me sad. And I also don't understand why it took so long for, if they were overwhelmed, and I know that they said, we didn't plan and, we had to just let it run its course, why it took so long for backup to come in. That's what as I watched throughout the afternoon, I kept saying, where is the help? How is this happening in the United States of America? And I'm like you, Steve. I mean, I've gone to the Capitol and my pass was expired one day. I mean, and it was like, guns drawn. You're not coming in here, lady. So it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And of course, this is the discussion we're having. We know you're having it at home as well. Make sure you weigh in. Use that hashtag GoodDayDC and keep it going throughout the morning.
Capitol Police need to step up. They need to explain what happened yesterday. No one who was inside that Capitol, who broke in unlawfully inside that Capitol, should have been able to get out of that Capitol. FBI now coming forward and saying, hey, let us know who was in there. That should never happen. They should have had those people in custody when they were inside of that building.
Having said that, Steve, too, though, most of those people were not wearing masks. And a lot of those people, there's pictures. So all of those people can be identified and all of those people should be held accountable.
But it's disheartening because you see already everybody blaming it on somebody else. And that's just where we are in 2020, 2021. The people who are inside that Capitol, I don't think there's any determination whether or not they were at fault.
If those police did abandon a position rather than lean into a physical clash, that's a tactical choice. But even that, I want you to know tonight, contrasts with recent scenes like this in a far less vital national security zone. This was not the U.S. Capitol, but rather a scene on the streets of L.A. where officers were engaging extremely physically to escalate and hit and strike Black Lives Matter protesters, hitting them with batons, shooting projectiles, when they were reportedly standing there with their hands up. It looked like state-sanctioned violence, a contrast to this treatment of Trump supporters who weren't peaceful, who breached federal property, who threatened officers, and worse. This is where the double standard goes beyond some of that big picture structure I mentioned, whether at a policy level the Capitol was properly staffed and protected. And we get into some of these personal interactions. Here's an officer assisting someone during these criminal riots, pouring water in their eyes to reduce the impact of the tear gas that the same officers themselves dispersed. This is what it looks like when, even amidst an ongoing emergency that included a death, an officer goes out of their way to assist people on the scene in the trespassed area. A total contrast to police actions at many BLM protests, where peaceful protesters were tear gassed, then they were fleeing, they weren't on any trespass property, they weren't rendered any aid to reduce the impact on their eyes or their health. These are facts that many would rather ignore or minimize or lie about. This is America. This is the double standard that many would rather not face. On the left, the police rendering aid to people in a crowd while they were still actively breaking the law and trespassing, breaching the Capitol at a crime scene that included a killing. On the right, police treating black and brown people and other BLM supporters who, by most accounts in the public square, were not breaking any law, certainly not trespassing. I got to tell you, as part of my job, this is where words themselves also can fail us. Because this double standard, it can make even simple terms pretty Orwellian. As journalists, we refer to the police and federal agents as law enforcement. It's supposed to just be like a factual term, nothing more than that. But take a look at a member of the Capitol Police in riot gear who appears to be escorting a lawbreaker, a person who broke federal law, you see there, down the steps and then releasing releasing the vast majority of these people, not arresting them. The people inside the Capitol were breaking the law. They were in an active trespass zone. They also broke other strict laws that protect federal buildings. If a person is helping walk them out in the middle of that law breaking, can we accurately call that law enforcement? Because they're not enforcing the law in that moment. These recent BLM protests in Washington, for example, were largely peaceful. There was not a single breach of the Capitol, for example, but D.C. police arrested 289 people in one day at those recent BLM protests and 427 over 4 days. You see there. They made just 41 arrests yesterday amidst a criminal and national security breach that the U.S. has not seen at this Capitol since 1812. If you take the larger count of arrests beyond the Capitol, by the way, it jumps to 68, but 41 of them in that criminal mob at the Capitol. Those are some numbers. They may not go as viral as some of these pictures and videos, but they're that larger factual context. And after the many hours that this played out yesterday, after Mitch McConnell was so moved to call it an insurrection on the floor of the Senate, after the world rebuked the United States, then the feds under the Trump administration found their way to filing their first charges today. And we heard more Orwellian words from the FBI, which, of course, Donald Trump has systematically pressured and hollowed out its leadership. I can report for you, the FBI now claims they're doing basically a manhunt. They're seeking information, they say, to identify and to find these people.
Capitol building. They are marching through now.
I'm sorry. How are you going to do a manhunt for people who spent hours doing their crimes on live TV and then, as I just showed you, got escorted out by those officers? Why is this FBI under this administration claiming to seek information when you have people who told the New York Times their names while taking time out of their crime scene to pose for a photo, holding up the Speaker of the House's stolen mail, or this Trump supporter walking out of the Capitol with the Speaker of the House's lectern? Spare us the jargon about seeking information to find these people. When you let these criminals walk in and out of the seat of government, this contrast. This is America. This white man there, leisurely sitting at the desk of the elected Speaker of the House of Representatives of the United States. A police response so lax, he had the time to gloat and pose, compared to how police instantly arrested the woman you see on the right. She committed no visible crime. She was protesting the police shooting of Alton Sterling in 2016. She said she was exercising her free speech rights. Police took her away on a charge of obstructing a highway.
What we're seeing there, rioters throwing flags, crutches at police, appearing to try and hit them with absolutely anything they can find. All of this unfolding as the crowd is yelling and cheering, in fact, in support of these horrific actions.
We thank our valiant law enforcement officers who are true American heroes. What we saw yesterday was a group of violent rioters undermining the legitimate First Amendment rights of the many thousands who came to peacefully have their voices heard in our nation's capital. Those who violently besieged our capital are the opposite of everything this administration stands for. The core value of our administration is the idea that all citizens have the right to live in safety, peace, and freedom. Those who are working in this building are working to ensure an orderly transition of power. Now it is time for America to unite, to come together, to reject the violence that we have seen. We are one American people under God. Thank you very much.
We've been in there. There ain't nothing going on in there. It's not right. Yeah! We will not give up. Let's go get a beer and then come back. And then come back. Yeah, we stopped the mob! Yeah, we stopped the mob! They left. We did it. Yeah. Yeah. Don't kill any more people while you're in there. If we come back, we're not going to be like this. Next time we come back, we're going to be hard. I'm 75. You don't appreciate this day. See? No violence. Oh, stand. I'm 75. Do not lose it. Hold your breath. Stand and fight.
An intense nationwide manhunt is now on for the people behind the attack.
Congress is planning to move ahead with impeachment votes against President Trump.
And Natalie Brand has the very latest for WJZ from Capitol Hill.
Vice President Mike Pence arrived at the White House this afternoon as CBS News has learned he and President Trump are barely speaking to each other. While Democratic leaders have called on Mr. Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office, House Democrats are also discussing moving forward with articles of impeachment.
I think the American people have seen enough, and they are ready. for us to do the job of impeaching this man.
House Democrats say they could vote as soon as next week, but there's limited time for a Senate trial to remove the president before the inauguration.
I think it's a ridiculous discussion to have. I've got enough decisions to make about things that can happen rather than to spend time on things that can't happen.
Democratic leaders Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer say President Trump needs to be held accountable for the assault on the Capitol by rioters supporting him. Speaker Pelosi says she's speaking this afternoon to President-elect Joe Biden about impeachment.
We're going to do our job, and the Congress can decide how to proceed with theirs.
President Trump released a video last night condemning the violence more than 24 hours after the assault. Despite weeks of calling the election rigged, he now says it's time for unity.
A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
But the president did not specifically concede and says he will not attend President-elect Biden's inauguration. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
And here's a look at all the Trump administration officials who have now resigned, including a number of national security advisors, top press aides, and so far, 2 cabinet members.
Well, as we've been telling you, law enforcement is now looking for dozens of people who were involved in that siege as part of an investigation that could now include homicide charges. As Jeff Pegues reports for WJZ for Capitol Hill, there are more concerns now about even more attacks.
The violent domestic terrorism seen on Capitol Hill on Wednesday killed Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, a 12-year veteran who most recently served in the department's first responder unit. In a statement, Capitol Police said Officer Sicknick collapsed after a confrontation with violent rioters, and his death is being investigated as a possible homicide. Sicknick's death comes hours after the U.S. Capitol Police Chief and House and Senate Sergeants-at-Arms stepped down after outrage from the police union and both sides of the aisle on Wednesday's security failures.
Hey, we come back!
A second U.S. Capitol Police officer who responded to the Capitol riots last week has died. Officer Howard Liebengood died January 9th. No word on the cause of his death. Liebengood was with the department for 15 years, being assigned to the Senate Division on the day of the insurrection.
They could have killed us all. They could have destroyed the government.
The Justice Department is investigating stolen electronic items and documents possibly containing sensitive national security information. Thousands of National Guard troops deployed into Washington overnight to help secure the city. CBS News has learned that some of the rioters involved in Wednesday's attack have remained in the area, and new intelligence shows that they may be planning more attacks in the city and on federal buildings. A full manhunt is on as the FBI and D.C. police search airports and hotels for rioters who ransacked the Capitol. The FBI released this photo of a person believed to be responsible for the pipe bombs found in D.C. on Wednesday, offering a $50,000 reward for any information. There are also warning signs on social media that Inauguration Day may be their next target. A post on a white supremacist Telegram channel says it is the next date on the calendar that the pro-Trump and other nationalist crowds will potentially converge on the Capitol again. On Wednesday, the FBI says so far it has received about 4,000 tips. Jeff Pegues, CBS News, Washington.
Ma'am, what happened to you?
I got maced.
You got maced?
Please.
And what happened? You were trying to go inside the Capitol?
Yeah, I made it like a foot inside, and they pushed me out, and they maced me.
What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee.
And why did you want to go in?
We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution.
Thank you.